Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
Now I know this isn't exactly an HOA story, but let's be real, it's the same kind of nonsense. It's a different set of people in charge, but the game is the same. The rules change whenever they feel like it, and they make up policies on the fly as if they've got nothing better to do with their time than make life miserable for people just trying to get by. It's not about being reasonable or fair. It's about having power, and the people in charge love to flex that power, even if it means bending the truth or just ignoring the facts. The system might be different, but the frustration, that's the same, and it's always the little guy who gets the short end of the stick. You'd think they'd get that, but no. When it comes to this kind of management, whether it's an HOA or some other bureaucratic mess, it's all about pushing the rules until someone breaks. And guess what? It's always us who get caught in the crossfire. The whole system is just a game of who's got the most authority, and we're just left scrambling to make sense of it all. The day started like any other in our little corner of the mobile home park. I was sipping my morning coffee, watching the neighbors go about their business through the slightly grimy window of our trailer. My daughter Sarah was getting ready for work, her routine as predictable as the sunrise. "Dad," she called from her room, "have you seen my blue sweater?" I chuckled to myself. Sarah's autism meant she liked things just so, and a missing sweater could throw her whole day off. "Check the laundry basket, honey. I think I saw it there yesterday." As I heard her rummaging around, my eyes fell on the letter that had arrived a few days ago. It was from the park management, and it had been giving me heartburn ever since I'd opened it. "Paint your trailer within 2 months," it said, just like that, as if we had nothing better to do with our time and money. Sarah emerged from her room, blue sweater in hand. "Found it," she said with a small smile. I could see the tension in her shoulders, though. She knew about the letter, too. "Hey, kiddo," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "What do you think about giving this old place a fresh coat of paint, maybe that mint green color you like?" Her eyes lit up for a moment before dimming again. "But Dad, won't that be expensive?" I waved off her concern, even as my stomach clenched at the thought of the cost. "Don't you worry about that. Your mom and I will handle it. Why don't you stop by the office on Saturday and get the color approved?" Sarah nodded, her routine for the day now set in her mind. As she left for work, I picked up the phone to call my wife, Linda. "Hey, hun," I said when she answered. "Looks like we're going to be shelling out for a paint job." Linda sighed on the other end of the line. "How much are we talking?" "I'm not sure yet, but it won't be cheap. At least $2,000, I'd guess." $2,000, Linda's voice rose in pitch. "For a trailer we don't even live in." I ran a hand through my thinning hair. I know, but what choice do we have? We can't let Sarah deal with this on her own." The week crawled by, each day bringing us closer to the dreaded painting project. On Saturday, Sarah went to the office as planned. She came back looking relieved. "The lady said it was fine," she reported. "As long as it's a light color, it's okay." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. We hired a local painter, a guy named Mike, who came recommended by one of the neighbors. He seemed decent enough, and his quote was fair considering the size of the job. For the next week, our little trailer was a hive of activity. Mike and his crew scraped, primed, and painted from dawn till dusk. The mint green color slowly spread across the faded siding, bringing new life to our humble abode. Sarah watched the transformation with growing excitement. "It looked so pretty, Dad," she said one evening as we stood outside admiring the progress. I had to admit it did look good. The fresh paint made the whole place seem newer, cleaner somehow. Maybe this had been a blessing in disguise. But then, just as the last coat was drying, another letter arrived. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Sarah's face as she handed me the envelope. Her hands were shaking slightly, and her eyes were wide with worry. "What is it, sweetie?" I asked, even as I tore open the letter. My heart sank as I read the contents. The color, they said, was unapproved. The mint green that had brought such joy to my daughter's face was apparently not acceptable to the park management. But we got it approved," Sarah stammered, her voice rising in pitch as her anxiety kicked in. "The lady said it was fine." I tried to keep my own anger in check as I dialed the office number. This had to be a mistake. We'd followed their rules, jumped through their hoops. They couldn't do this to us. The woman who answered the phone was not helpful. "The person who approved the color wasn't authorized to do so," she said, her voice cold and uncaring. "She's made several mistakes like this. The general manager will call you back to discuss the situation." I hung up the phone, my hand shaking with suppressed rage. How dare they? How could they put us through this, make us spend all this money, only to turn around and say it wasn't good enough? Sarah was pacing the small living room, her hands flapping at her sides, a sure sign of her distress. "What are we going to do, Dad?" she asked, her voice small and scared. I wished I had an answer for her. I wished I could tell her that everything would be okay, that we'd sort this out, but the truth was I had no idea what we were going to do. Days passed, and still no word from the general manager. I called again, left messages, but nothing. It was like they were deliberately ignoring us. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the GM called back. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of someone used to delivering bad news. I understand your frustration, he said, though his tone suggested he understood nothing of the sort. But the fact is, the color wasn't properly approved. I'll need to speak with my superiors about how to proceed. I wanted to reach through the phone and shake him. We did everything you asked, I shouted, my composure finally cracking. We got approval, we spent thousands of dollars, and now you're telling us it's not good enough? The GM remained maddeningly calm. I understand, sir. As I said, I'll need to consult with my superiors. We'll be in touch. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling utterly helpless. Sarah was watching me, her eyes wide and fearful. What did he say, Dad? I couldn't bring myself to upset her further. They're still discussing it, honey. Try not to worry, but of course we both worried. Every day that passed without word from the park management was another day of uncertainty, another day of stress. Linda was furious when I filled her in. This is ridiculous, she fumed. We can't afford to paint it again. And even if we could, why should we? We did what they asked. I agreed with her, but what could we do? We were at the mercy of the park management, and they seemed to hold all the cards. The neighbors started to talk. I could feel their eyes on us whenever we stepped outside. Some were sympathetic, others seemed to take a perverse pleasure in our misfortune. Heard you got in trouble with management, old Mrs. Johnson said one day, as I was checking the mail. Such a shame. That green is such a pretty color. I mumbled something non-committal and hurried back inside. The last thing we needed was to become the neighborhood gossip. Sarah's anxiety worsened as the days wore on. She started having trouble at work, forgetting things, getting overwhelmed easily. I hated seeing her like this, knowing it was all because of some arbitrary decision made by people who didn't even live here. One night, about a week after the GM's call, Sarah broke down completely. She was sitting at the kitchen table staring at her untouched dinner when suddenly she burst into tears. I can't do this anymore, Dad, she sobbed. I can't live like this, not knowing what's going to happen. What if they make us leave? Where will I go? I rushed to her side, wrapping her in a hug. That's not going to happen, sweetie, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We won't let it happen. Your mom and I will figure something out. But as I held my crying daughter, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making a promise I couldn't keep. What if the park management decided to play hardball? What if they threatened eviction? Could we fight it? Could we afford to? The next day I decided enough was enough. I marched down to the park office determined to get some answers. The receptionist tried to fob me off with excuses about the GM being in meetings, but I refused to leave. I'll wait, I said, planting myself in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs in the waiting area. I've got all day. Hours passed. Other residents came and went, giving me curious looks. I sat there, stubborn as a mule, until finally the GM emerged from his office. He looked surprised to see me there. Mr. Johnson, he said, his voice carefully neutral. I was just about to call you. I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting for so long. Well, here I am. Let's talk. He ushered me into his office, a small, stuffy room with cheap motivational posters on the walls. As I sat down across from him, I could feel my anger bubbling up again. Look, I said before he could speak, this situation is unacceptable. We followed your rules. We got approval. We spent money we can barely afford. And now you're telling us it's not good enough? My daughter is having anxiety attacks because of this. Do you understand what you're putting us through? The GM leaned back in his chair, his face impassive. I understand this is a difficult situation, Mr. Johnson. But rules are rules. The color wasn't properly approved, and I cut him off. No, you don't get to hide behind rules are rules. Your employee approved the color. That's on you, not us. We're not repainting. We can't afford it, and we shouldn't have to. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, sympathy maybe, in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I'll have to discuss this with the owner, he said finally. I can't make any promises, but I'll see what I can do. I left the office feeling drained, but slightly hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, we'd made some progress. But as the days turned into weeks and still no word came from the office, that hope began to fade. Sarah's anxiety continued to worsen. Linda and I argued more and more about what to do next. The mint green paint that had once seemed so cheerful now felt like a constant reminder of our powerlessness. And still we waited, for a decision, for a resolution, for something to change. But nothing did. We were stuck in limbo, our future uncertain, all because of a coat of paint and a bureaucratic mix-up. All I want is for them to admit they made a mistake, and for my daughter to be left alone. But if there's one thing I've learned in all of this, it's that you can't count on people like them to do the right thing. They'll take your money, your time, and your patience, and at the end of the day, they'll just shrug and tell you to deal with it. As I sat on the steps of our mint green trailer one evening watching the sun set over the park, I couldn't help but wonder how things had come to this. How had a simple paint job turned into such a nightmare? And more importantly, how were we going to get out of it? The truth was, I didn't know, and as the darkness settled over the park, I realized that maybe I never would. If you have anything in writing, the office can't do shit except leave the color or pay for a repaint. If not, next time you speak to them, record them saying their employee screwed up. Any evidence you can get showing the situation was caused by their staff member puts the liability back on them, and any repaint costs should be covered by the office. In the end, it has no relevance if the staff member was not authorized or just incompetent. It was their staff and therefore their responsibility to rectify. Sadly, it seems that the approval was verbal, nothing in writing. This may be the sticking point. They know this office person gives out the wrong information, but they still have her give info to residents. There should be a procedure in place or form to fill out. If there is, and this office person didn't give the resident the proper documents, then this is also their fault in addition to the painting. Your writing style is so annoying. You drag on and on about every little detail like it's the most important thing ever. Who cares what color sweater your daughter was wearing? And all that dramatic build-up about waiting in the office? Boring, get to the point already. Plus, you come across as totally whiny. So you had to paint your trailer, big deal. People have real problems out there. And don't even get me started on how you keep bringing up your daughter's autism like it's some kind of get-out-of-adulting-free card. Plenty of autistic people manage their own lives just fine without mommy and daddy holding their hands.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.